Hi everyone. I have a sad tale of delayed justice. Today, Kristen Smart's murderer, who murdered her 26 years ago on Memorial Day weekend, on May 25th, 1996, finally, Flores is going to be held accountable for his murder. This is a story of how the criminal justice system and law enforcement failed women for decades and created dozens of victims as a result. Please do not take what I am saying lightly here. There is something like 29 sexual assault victims that Paul Flores victimized after he murdered Kristen Smart. Let it also be known that a few years before he murdered Kristen, he also faced a rape charge which his family fled from the city of Torrance for and moved up to Northern California. They hid this for him after they had already moved him schools because he had beat a kid into a coma in middle school because his family demanded to protect him at all costs. This is what happens, women and men, when you raise a boy that you are willing to brush off and say, boys will be boys. This is what happens when you would rather protect your child than protect children in general. This is what happens when law enforcement doesn't take women's words seriously. This is what happens. Kristen Smart's death could have been avoided. The victimization and traumatization of nearly 30 other women could have been prevented if law enforcement would have taken seriously Kristen Smart's disappearance the weekend she went missing. Or, the few weeks after she went missing and a cadaver dog, not just a cadaver dog, 4 cadaver dogs hit on his mattress. All these tips that had came in about him admitting to have done it, of his continued rape behavior, that he would film and he would sodomize people and he would penetrate them vaginally against their will. He would drug them. I hope San Luis Obispo County will be held fiscally responsible for all the damage they did by letting Paul Flores get away with this. Now let it be known, this sheriff's department decided not to dig up the Flores' backyard in a search warrant executed in the early 2000s. Why, you may ask? Well, they took a vote on it and they didn't feel like it. They would have found Kristen's body at this time. This is what shitty, lazy police work does. It leads women to get killed and to have their fucking lives ruined. Now, 3 women were supposed to testify against Paul for his assaults against them, the rapes. 2 were only able to show up, and it is my belief that the 3rd was someone who, the day she was scheduled, was a day that a witness was out sick and she never showed up as intended. I think that this likely upset her so deeply. Because how couldn't it? Look at the system that failed you. Look around at the system that failed you. Look into the deep, dead shark eyes of this predator in front of you that was allowed to prey on you because it didn't take any other women seriously. Let that be known. I cannot fathom how terrified, how sick she felt, and I do not blame her for not testifying. Every single woman who testified against this man is a fucking hero in my book. This is a pig. This is a repeated offender right here that the state of California allowed to continue to harm people. This is what happens when we do not hold dangerous men accountable. And sadly, Ruben Flores, his father, who was most definitely an accessory after the fact. However, in the pretrial hearings, some key evidence was not allowed to be heard by his jury, particularly that he had received a call late at night, the night that Kristen died, and he went and picked up Paul in the middle of the night. I wonder what he was doing. Perhaps sliding Kristen's dead, lifeless body out of Paul's window near the bike racks that happened to connect to a parking lot that he could easily back his truck up into and then get away in. So the one thing that bothers me is that we've let Ruben off the hook, and Ruben has been key in relocating Kristen's body at least one time. I have a theory that that Kristen's body has been moved now 3 times. I believe at one point she was under Susan Flores's backyard. I think that was short term. Of course, and then you have, I believe, either some kind of evidence or she simply poured concrete over to in her flower beds to dampen any smell by a cadaver dog, because there have been cadaver dogs of neighboring properties that had hit at the corner of Susan's properties, but obviously they weren't allowed to go on because she wouldn't grant them access. Now it is also believed that she had been in Wasna under at some point on a property that Paul obviously lied and claimed was his, and that she was underneath a skate ramp. And there are satellite images that definitely corroborate the fact that there was a skate ramp. And then also, obviously, most notably, underneath Ruben Flores' deck. And miraculously, no search warrant was really granted the day that they arrested Ruben and Paul back in, I believe, April 2020, or maybe it was April 2021. And then a few weeks later, they decide to put up a camera for surveillance. And this is after a neighbor, had seen Paul and Susan and her Susan's boyfriend up all night yelling and screaming with the fucking tractor trailer to relocate Kristen's remains. Where she's at now, I don't know. But I'm upset because I think that the Smart family deserves to put her to rest, that the people who love her are allowed to have her back. She's been underneath underneath the feet of people who called her a dirty slut, who didn't appreciate her life, the people who hid her from her family and who would not grant them peace. This is the man that called Kristen a dirty slut and who collected drawers full of memorabilia related to the Kristen Smart case, and who became a hermit, all to protect his precious little predator boy who followed in his precious predator footsteps. After all, Ruben Flores is a noted abuser, domestic violence. He loves to beat women, and he raised his proud little scumbag of a son to be just like him. Now, I really don't want to read about the true crime community jumping on this, because the reality is the true crime community has not covered this case. And I dread people like 10 to Life or JS for Justice getting a hold of this information and then pontificating on some bullshit, because they are the worst of this community. And of a community I don't think I even belong to, because I have followed these type of tragedies for well over 25 years at this point, and we never called ourselves a true crime community, and we sure as hell didn't show our ass and act an ass the way that the current one does. Here's beautiful Kristen, cheated of life forever 19. And the thing that bothers me is that Susan Flores is the weakest link here. And I think that she would, if we could get her to crack, she would, and she would tell us. But what I will say is that with Ruben being acquitted of accessory to murder after the fact, which is just an egregious injustice, I don't think we'll ever find her remains now. Because now Ruben is free to go home and continue to obstruct the investigation and continue to harbor Kristen's remains, desecrate her grave, her legacy, her body, and continue to torment the Smarts for the rest of his miserable, useless life. This is just a small piece of justice, considering there's a lot of justice for Kristen we need. A lot. And this is just the beginning. Don't let up. I'm going to continue covering this. And I might even do a series on this. Because I really, really don't want to see these scumbag crime YouTubers who just jump on any opportunity to create a salacious story and whip out dumbass, weird hypotheticals. And Kristen could have been any one of us women. And a whole bunch of women worked together to bring her justice and to take pervert Paul, Chester the molester Paul, down.